Well, I can start with a really quick rundown. Mine is, I just started the. I don't know if you guys, some of you, I know you guys had the time to review my post. It's not really the purpose of this phone call, but I just, engage in this and seeing where I can add value. I feel very comfortable starting that vein. So I, started some questions as far as the bylaws, the Constitution. I'm getting some really, really good feedback from you guys, and I'm definitely going to continue. I have what we will really call the really, really rough draft of sort of like a bylaw, but I can absolutely evolve into sort of more of a constitution, and then put that up in the working group structure. I know RV had asked, and I thought about it too, if I could post it before the call. Unfortunately, I don't. I'm currently traveling, so I don't have access to my laptop where I save it. But that's forthcoming in the next few days, and that's just kind of the Constitution type conversation. That's not really related to the details of the Treasury working group, which I know is kind of what we're meeting today. But I just kind of wanted to put that out there. I would love to get you all's support if you have time. Obviously, feedback. If somebody here is a little more advanced in working on a constitution type document, I will be more than happy to jump in as well and send them what I have. But overall, it's that's sort of my focus area, and where I feel I can easily add value based on my comfort level.
Yeah, that's cool. I think we should definitely discuss this on this call as well. I think we could just put it after we finish the Treasury multisig thing. Um, 'Cause there's,
Perfect.
yeah, I think those are the two main topics we should be discussing in the community right now. But the first one then is Treasury Working Group. I just want to give an update on the technical side. The feature to withdraw from the smart contract in RunVM that stores the community ecosystem fund, that feature is complete, but it's stated to it's going to be included in the next RunVM update, which will be uh, it will be pushed to mainnet after the Christmas break. So there's a bunch of features that have been worked on that are sort of complete and they're being baked into the protocol. But since those are like they're big mainnet upgrades. The team has to be like super prepared in case something goes down. It's like a hard fork. It's not really a hard fork, but it's like that's the kind of level when you update all of the nodes that run everything. So that's coming out sometime after the Christmas break in January. So that means that from that moment we can withdraw funds to any address that the community has whitelisted. Uh, so it can be the SafeSnap thing, that's one thing, and it can also be like this nimble multi-sig operated by a few trusted Treasury working group people. So to make sure that we hit the ground running when that comes in January, I think we should sort of prepare for that now. Like even if we set up a multi-sig now that can't do anything, it will be able to do something in maybe in 3 weeks. So we should, and it will take a while to sort of figure out, okay, who will be the appropriate members in that group. Then the community has to vote and approve this group before we should set everything up. So like I strongly suggest that we should get this sort of rolling as soon as possible because we have to post this on the forum and have a snapshot vote for all of it to be proper. Um, so yeah, just want to hear what you guys think about that.
Well, that's really exciting. I'm curious, what all the other updates are going to be, but essentially this looks like the functional change that will allow a working group, a Treasury working group, to begin doing its work. So, based on the timeline, and our cadence here as a group and as a community, it looks like that feature will be ready to be used before we have all of our documentation and guardrails and whatnot sorted. So I think it's very appropriate that Seeking has taken it upon himself to start driving that process. Maybe as a first step, we should sort of gauge, everyone here's comfort, with getting something together, that's perhaps a bit quicker than it would take to get something thorough together with respect to a fully fledged constitution, set of mandates, and all of that. I mean, should we, get an acting group together first, and then fill in the particulars so we can start getting grants out and things like that, or at least get Bitcoin into Badger, or should we take a more cautious approach? What do people think?
I do think we have two sort of parallel things going on right now. There's still the yield working group, and then there's the larger vision of the DAO. And it sounds like Seeking's starting to talk about the ultimate larger guiding documents of the DAO, which I think are important to start thinking about. But some of that's still going to be informed by this working group thing. That's kind of a much smaller context that we're working on now. So I definitely think we need to get to Max's point that multi-sig aspect figured out, and we kind of need to define what we're doing from the yield group sense. And we should be able to get that moving before we've actually fully fleshed out a DAO and its vision. And does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes me wonder if, and I don't want to try to derail anyone's work that they're putting in, but Seeking, I wonder if starting with the part of that document that would ultimately concern the Treasury working group might be a great place to start if you're going to be putting in the time. And I'm happy to help. I've just cleared a great weight of work from my schedule, so I can dive in on whatever I can help with.
Sure, great points, guys. So a little bit more context. I spent, probably several dozen hours just kind of drafting in-depth bylaws before my wife said, "Stop staring at the laptop. Go to bed." So, long story short, I can easily refine it and sort of split two documents, and I'll post. I can kind of condense it into more or less a really rough framework with elections, re-elections, emergency procedures, blah blah blah, for the Treasury working group, and provide a more holistic one for the Constitution. And obviously, it seems that the one that will probably take more momentum in the shorter time frame will probably be the Treasury working group framework, which I to use an analogy, I have a lot of meat in the bones, so we can condense that as much as necessary. That's forthcoming no later than maybe early next week, like Monday. I'll post that, and it's quite a bit. So I'd rather have you guys share a lot of. I'll share with you guys a lot of what I have in a structured way that you guys can then just hey, you know what? Let's take this out. Let's add this. So that's I put in major work already on sort of structuring them. By the way, I got inspired a lot from what's being done already out there. MakerDAO. It's a lot of other really great examples. I just personalized it a little bit more towards us. I added some terms unique to us and sort of perspectives that I think really capture kind of overall where we're heading. But obviously, that when you guys pitch in, it's going to get a lot better, a lot faster, I think. So that there's both elements coming for sure. I'm pretty advanced when it comes to that.
Well, that's really exciting. One question I have, Seeking, is what do you feel would be the best way for all of us to provide feedback? Internally, in companies that I've worked on, we've had a group of stakeholders get around a Google document. Everybody adds their comments to various sections, and then we have calls to discuss, the trends in the comments or something like that. I worry that, if we post it and then there's just, lots of people posting in the Discord, that some of the nuance could get lost. So what do you think is the best way for us to discuss where to go with all the sections and subsections that we're going to be receiving from your hard work?
You know what? I actually that's a great post. That's a great question that I'm sort of struggling with as well, since the nature here is like fully open and transparent. But I do agree with you. I'm very comfortable, if we have a Google Doc and add it. That's very intuitive for me. But then I was like, okay, well, I don't know if that's sort of what the group wants. Maybe we can just attack it within the working group structure. So there's like records, and you want to minimize FUD, right? We want to minimize the perception of as much as possible, obviously. So I said, well, maybe I could just post this in the working group structure, and obviously sort of the key core members will naturally orbitate towards giving feedback. And obviously I can just keep on updating it. But again, I don't know if that's just weird. I'm used to the Google Doc as well. I just want to minimize. I'm very mindful of the perception of what we're doing. I want to make sure that it works as close as possible to the transparent. But I'm fully open. To me, that's just the best I could come up with. Hey, let's do a working group structure post. Let's dice it, slice it, and then we can move it towards a governance thread to get more feedback, and then we can discuss what's the best way to do it. But if the Google Doc that's open to everybody and anonymous works, that also could be an option. I'm fully open and looking forward to hearing you guys' thoughts.
Would you guys be fine if we pended that conversation until after the Treasury working group stuff?
Of course.
Max, where were we with the talking about the aspects you were coming in with? You were talking about the sort of the multi-sig aspect, etc.
I mean, yeah, that would be so to get stuff done faster, like to actually get something done. We can have an acting like a preliminary working group multi-sig that can actually achieve stuff, and then we can update over time and improve and put all the guardrails in place and voting mechanisms. So we need to remove a member or something, but we should together come up with a structure now where we could organize uh, a group of people, either 7 or 5, that could control a multi-sig. So we could withdraw funds from the community ecosystem fund to this multi-sig that could deploy those funds in, for instance, Badger that's been discussed for RemBTC, so we can start earning yield with those funds. How we go about this, I'm not sure. So what's the best process? We have to think about the whole community. Of course, it has to be something that dark node operators have to vote on and approve on. Uh, but how we as a group now come together with who will be those members, that's a tricky subject. I'm not sure what's the best approach here.
I think one approach. Sorry to interrupt.
To create a budget.
Well, I was just going to say, as regards the vote, I think we have people who've been invested in this room, all presented, right, and then the community gets the weight of their voting rights to allocate between them, and we take the 5 or 7 top ones, and of course we'll have to describe each person's qualifications. So maybe we all write sort of a semi-anonymous bio, to fill out so people know roughly who they're looking at. So something like that. Anyone feel free to fill in, but obviously there's other components to this, but something like that will ultimately, I think, need to be presented and voted on by the broader community.
I imagine at some point when we bring our ultimate proposal to the community to say this is what we would like to do, we would like the approval and release of funds to be put into a yield to earn some to earn some ROI on them while they sit. I imagine we'd include it in that. I'm guessing. Does anybody have any best practices around the sort of 5 or 7 multi-sig aspect? I know there was some talk about we should have some sort of KYC dossier on everybody prior, but I think somebody was talking about that generally they'd seen in other DAOs that doesn't seem strictly necessary for, I don't know, security. Is something about the amount of people involved. Does anybody have any sort of best practices sense on running those multi-sigs?
Yeah, for
Sorry, Wes, you cut out.
Keeper DAO, we just use a Genosis multisig, and then I just ran through the steps right now real quickly, and it's pretty simple. You can add and subtract the multisig participants, and you can set the approval threshold to whatever majority that we want.
So how did you, like, which people did you put on this multi-sig? How did you do any vetting?
So we start. I'll find the KI the It's like the Keeper DAO equivalent of the RAP. We just came up with six members, so like two from team, two from the community, and then two like keeper participants. I'll find the document and then I'll post it in the chat. But it was meant to be where the first selection of these multi-sig participants were kind of agreed upon by everyone, and then there would be some sort of election or like removal process if if there's dissatisfaction with any of the members.
Was this for an analogous purpose? Was this like a smaller team that would use? So we're looking at sort of yield funds. We're not looking at like the ultimate authority on, all things. Or was this like your sort of main governing leaders?
Can you say that again? The volume was kind of low.
My apologies. Was this analogous to? We're trying to set up this small group for the yield. Was your sort of Keeper DAO set of folks assigned analogous to this smaller purpose of moving the funds over, or was this more of your larger governing kind of leaders? If that makes sense.
I mean, I guess it's the larger governing leaders. I mean, the Keeper DAO Treasury has over $100 million compared to we have like 5 Bitcoin, 6 Bitcoin. So there's a big difference there. But I mean, as in regards to just like best practices, a multi-sig is shouldn't really matter what funds are in it if it's controlled by a DAO.
That's your treasury fund. I guess that would be pretty similar to our treasury fund then, right? Or Max or RV, did you see a difference between a greater treasury related thing, or is that kind of what we're talking about here? Does this small working group yield become that sort of greater treasury thing, or is that a separate concept?
Well, I think there would be an overall treasury management strategy and processes that we have within the DAO, and yield farming is a subset or like a part of this bigger thing. But building the bigger thing will take longer for us. Setting up like a yield farming group right now, that would be quicker and more actionable anyway. So how that transition takes place when we also establish the bigger kind of treasury protocols for managing the DAO treasury. I mean, that we'll see in the future. That's something that's probably going to take maybe half a year or something. But the yield farming thing we can set up now in a few weeks.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think
that's the distinction I was
just
trying to make. That we're working on the smaller little group here rather than setting the ultimate guiding principles and leaders. This is sort of the smaller yield group focus. I'm taking some notes. So I appreciate the clarification.
Yeah, just to borrow from earlier sentiments, DeFi Whiskey had expressed in previous calls. He seemed to be suggesting that the idea of proposing this yield farming strategy is going to make apparent the needs for broader organization, and this is a good exercise for us to have something to crystallize around to get that work done. So I think what ultimately those of us here should be ready to propose, are two RIPs for the community to vote on. One that lays out, here's a yield farming strategy that we're going to undertake. We're going to use, we're going to ask you to disperse this much from the treasury into that strategy, and we're going to do this with it for this amount of time, and we flesh that all out. And then the second one being, okay, here are the list of candidates from within the community and team that we feel are a good fit. Vote for your favorite one or ones based on this information. And if we all hustle, I think we could probably get that ready in a couple of weeks. I mean, we've got the holidays, and it's hard to get a lot of important work done in this time of year. But I think we've got a lot of brain power here.
Does anyone here have a legal background? like from a standpoint of structure, because like if we're managing funds, like in theory, those funds should get invested, and if those investments have returns, then in theory, depending on the jurisdiction or depending on where it is, I mean, maybe it's been unruled, maybe there's no formal entity level structure that DAOs have to operate within until further notice. Does anyone have any idea how other DAOs have treated it from a government standpoint or jurisdiction standpoint?
So I'm not a lawyer. I've at all, but I've worked with them very closely, and most of my research, I would say 60% of it over the last 2.5 weeks or so has been heavily focused on that topic. The high level answer from people way smarter than us non lawyers is that one is jurisdiction dependent, and two, the few jurisdictions, countries, right, that have some sort of affinity towards working with DAOs is still up in the air. There's Wyoming in the U.S. There's other couple nations in Europe that it's all over, right? So there's no set in stone answer. It's definitely at the frontier of kind of this what DAO means for regulators. So there's no set in stone answer, and that's something that it's I try to reflect that in the bylaws document to sort of show awareness, right? Because that obviously didn't stop the other huge DAOs we're talking about, right? Keeper DAO and everything. So I didn't want to but there is some awareness that I displayed in the what I'll be posting. But from my research of hours and hours, there's no set in stone answer, even though some jurisdictions do offer some vehicles so people can incorporate legally. DAOs can incorporate, but it's not set in stone.
That's acceptable. The only thing you'd have to do then is, as a DAO, as we manage our funds, we just have to keep good records of where we put the money, when we put the money, and the timing of the actions around it, right? Like it just needs to be planned and documented, because if there comes a day where there is a clear guidance, it'll be retroactive in some capacity. And as long as we keep good records, no matter what jurisdiction we decide to set up camp, so to speak, we'll have good records and we'll be compliant. And I think keeping those records is an important action.
That's an excellent point, and I fully agree. And as for the legalese and structure component, just to add to what's been shared already, I think the closest thing to what we're talking about, that I can think of from a law point of view, and again, I'm not an attorney, but I have an attorney that I've worked with closely. Actually, is out in Wyoming and kind of interested in blockchain. I'll see if he has some capacity to weigh in, but the closest thing we'd be looking at is what's called an operating agreement. So any LLC or company, corporation, etc., that goes into business or has some dealings has to have an operating agreement on file, which basically lays out what it does, what its purpose is, who's part of it, how does it handle various situations, where do funds go, what kind of documents and accounting and records are kept, and all that sort of stuff. And they can be simple. They can be 5 pagers, or they can be hundreds of pages long. But there is a large body, and this is the important part. There's a large body of form documents that are pre-written that you can sort of just fill out. So I'm not suggesting that we just do that, but I think we can borrow a lot from existing documentation. Now, if we can find a lawyer or lawyers, that know this stuff really well and have worked with DAOs already, that could potentially be a huge shortcut. So I'm happy to look into that and put feelers out. If anybody else knows anyone, with that kind of experience, maybe, in Wyoming or internationally, that would be, great to bring up, so Seeking doesn't have to write everything from scratch.
Well, that I appreciate that, the empathy. So a couple things that definitely put out the feelers, Liberty, and I think that on my end, the two guiding principles I had was, okay, DAOs way bigger than us are doing this, and they are dealing with the same uncertainties we are. Nevertheless, they're I heard somebody in this call mention that Keeper DAOs is a couple $100 million, I think. We are all of 300 or 400,000. So dollars. So I do think that we can do the best that we can now. And there is a lot of borrowing and personalizing that I'm doing text wise, right? But overall, the gist of what I got was, wow, this is certainly new, but let's err on the side of transparency, on the side of, and I love what somebody else mentioned here. I think it was Renfield, of the record keeping, right? And that means leveraging some of the tools that are available online to sort of keep this as transparent as possible. But the Wyoming seems to be the Wyoming DAO sort of legally seems to be the most maybe the most common right now. I don't know if it's
Guys,
the most reasonable, but common.
guys, I'm gonna interrupt you right now. The topic of today's call was multisig, right? We've discussed for 30 minutes other topics. Let's return to what Max has said, talked about, and it was about how we can move with multisig specifically, how we can choose members and move on that front.
Good looking out, RV.
Respectfully.
No, thanks for
Because
that.
this is such a broad topic that you're trying to discuss. We can go on for hours, hours and hours, and we don't have that time. And I think community might not have that time as well. I'm open to jump at any time on and discuss this topic in a less formal setting. But now I think most of us are time limited in one way or another, and we should stick to the topic that we need to discuss right now as much as possible. Please, guys.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So has a process been proposed on
No.
how to at least qualify members? Maybe we can start there.
Yeah, that's a good point. Max has previously asked in the working group structure, I think, um, who wants to volunteer. Yeah, so we've got an initial list of you, Wes, me, Liberty, and Dude Seek. So that's like 3, 4, 5, and Tom. 6 guys now.
And DeFi, right? Didn't he want to be
N-
involved?
No, he didn't. He didn't say anything.
Hmm.
He might be. I don't know.
We should ask him
I
because
think I was on there as well. I thought DeFi was as well, but I'm not sure.
So the exact topics that we needed to discuss was how do we pick members, and who wants to be a member, and should we go 5 members or 7 members multisig format.
I would vote for 7 just because there's a chance of international coordination. Typically, if there's a quorum or a vote, you need to have a minimum set in order for that vote to get passed. And sometimes people aren't there to vote. So the more members that you have, like in this case, 5 versus 7, 7, you could still at least accept a minimum quorum of 5 and get things passed if, say, 2 members are unavailable, right? So I think there's an advantage to having not like saying 12 or 80 members exactly, but having a little bit more members to allow for that participation leniency is a good thing.
I would agree.
Yeah. After what Max said, I'm also more inclined for 7 people.
You're talking about
also
5
setting
of
that,
7. That would be 5 votes of a total of 7 members. Is that correct?
yeah,
No,
the concept
4 of
would be just
7.
setting a minimum for a quorum, which is an agreement that is qualifiable to pass an action.
And that makes 4 of 7, not 5 of 7, right?
You'd want to have at least 5 so that you'd have a decisive vote, and then it would take 4 to win it or 3 to win it or something like that.
But then
that
it's
can be
not.
defined.
But if we want to make 5 of 7, that's not as efficient because it's a lot harder to get 5 people online. And sometimes, as we discussed in the chat, we need to make like 5, 6, maybe even more transactions in a day. And it's a pain in the ass to get 5 different people from all over the world be able to sign the transactions fast enough.
We also
Maybe it's
discussed
possible.
that we want
If
those
it's
people to
possible,
be
sure.
informed, right? Like up to speed and informed on this as well.
Yep.
Arby, what do you see the options as? Let's say if we were choosing between A and B.
You mean number of people?
Yeah. I know we've talked about 5, so we talked about 7. That's 5. The first 5, was that a group of 5 and 3 needed to vote, or was it 5 that needed to sign amongst 7 or 9? What are the numbers here? What are we talking about?
We have discussed 3 of 5 and 4 of 7 previously.
Okay.
I think the way Gnosis Save works is there's no differentiation between sort of quorum and majority. It's the same. So if you have 5 out of 7, or if you have 4 out of 7, you can't require it to have 5 signatures. You're
Gotcha.
signing a transaction or you're not signing it. So
Oh, you need a
Then
minimum
that kind of
majority.
answers it.
Yep.
You would just need 4 out of 5, and if only 5 people show up and you have 4 of them that vote, that should suffice the criteria.
I think that's 3 of 5, isn't it?
Assuming that there's a total of 7 members.
Oh, I'm sorry. Gotcha.
So another question then is, do we want some kind of introduction, information, KYC, call it whatever you want, informal KYC, anything, any additional information about the multi-sig members?
Well, one thing I thought might be good is to have a or the member from the team, which in this case would be Max. Maybe all of us in the working group kind of put some trust in him to allow him to be the only person who KYCs us. Because as a member of the team, he's the one with the most to lose from spilling the beans, right? So that he could then vouch for those who have volunteered in some greater capacity than we would all individually want to share broadly with the community. Does that make sense? Is that something that sounds sensible?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking personal as well.
Max, are you willing to have a conversation with each person about a little bit about who they are?
Sure, I'm fine with it. I'm not sure if it's necessary, but if you guys think the community would appreciate that and it would increase the security of the multi-sig, then I'm all for it, of course. I wouldn't force it upon anyone, though. But if
I think
that's a requirement,
it makes sense to make it optional.
Maybe one question: do we want the team to have this responsibility going forward if we're going to more of a DAO structure owned by the community?
What do you mean? What responsibility?
Well, the responsibility of the team, i.e. you, KYCing the other members, right?
I mean, yeah, it might not make sense in the future, just because of sort of power balance and stuff, that we would want it to be decentralized, and it maybe isn't the most decentralized thing that I would be KYCing. That sort of implies that I have some kind of power. So
yeah, I would say as we document this too and stay transparent and look towards the future, I don't think the DAO should initially be set up so strongly by a team member, because I think that's part, correct me if I'm wrong, Max, that you and the team are trying to get away from. I'd be fine with that for this working group as long as we consider that informal, if that makes sense, because as we document the steps we're taking here, I think it's important that Max or the team is not the ultimate one that helped set this up with their hand-picked folks, as we consider moving to a DAO and not a structure that ultimately points back to the team still being in control of the community aspect. Does that make sense? Is that even an important concern, Max?
Yeah, it is an important concern for us because we want to set up this as a proper community DAO, and
I see it all.
Yeah.
Sorry, Michael, go ahead.
Why do it at all?
Yes.
I think that's a great question.
So, like, I wouldn't say it's a requirement to do KYC.
I would say not to do it. I mean, especially right now, the risks are low. I mean, the fund is small at the end of the day.
I mean,
second that.
I don't necessarily think that formal KYC is IDs and all that stuff is necessary. But the thought that I had was just for anyone who's interested to have a conversation essentially with Max.
Yeah, like a little
So
biography,
so that
a
he's
little about me.
comfortable, so that he's comfortable from the team recommending us, because this is kind of a bridge period, right? We don't have a DAO yet. Right now, we have a team and a community, and they're kind of disconnected. And as part of the handoff, I think it would make a lot of the community members more comfortable. If Max or someone from the team said, "Yeah, these guys all seem pretty good. Let's vote from this pool and give it a shot." And here's what we all talked about. But certainly, I don't think we should have points of KYC where our personal information is stored, potentially exploited in the future, or setting a fact pattern that could get anybody, individually in trouble. We would definitely want to avoid that.
Yeah,
I think
agreed.
that makes sense.
Yeah, like if it makes sense that we just had like a quick video chat and I just said hello, you said hello, and I could verify that you're a real human being and not a bot. That maybe that's all that it requires. That's all that's needed. No, I don't want any IDs shown or anything like that, because that's also an uncomfortable position
Nobody
to
wants
be.
that.
Uh,
Yeah. No ideas, definitely.
So additionally, we can also link the accounts to people's Twitter. So on the Twitter, someone will say like, "I will accept the nomination," and they will also mention the Ethereum address that they'll be using on the KYC. It's just an additional verification that the person actually accepting it, and there's a record of it.
I think what Max is proposing is reasonable, just to confirm that people are indeed people. I also don't know how a robot could participate in a call like this.
no, of course. Um,
So the next logical step is then just create a RIP with a list of people and put it up in a snapshot vote. Sounds simple, no?
I
You're talking
mean,
about.
yeah.
I think we should take the vote with our ultimately formed plan. Like right, we're making a big plan on what to do with this yield working group. Here's what we plan to
That's two
do. We're gonna
different
have some
things.
folks. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's two
Go ahead.
different. That's totally two different things, isn't it? One thing is the structure and who's in it, and the second thing is what those people will be doing. Basically, we're just
They are two separate things, but I kind of
at,
look
at
at them
this
as a package deal
at
right
this
now.
stage, we're just looking for people who will sign transactions. That's it. It was my understanding. Maybe I'm wrong here.
So maybe the point they're trying to make is that the community might not accept this if there's no actual gain from it, if they can't point to any specific win, but a yield strategy would show that, yeah, this group would implement this first strategy. This is all that's approved. They would implement this. There would be an immediate gain to the community.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
it
that's what
makes
I'm talking about. We're describing the limited scope of this working group, what they're going to do, how the working group's made up. Here's how they're going to expand the funds. I don't think we want to go to the dark node operators with 4 different votes, or if that makes sense. I think we want to propose what we plan to do, ask that the funds be handed over for this purpose to whatever the group is, and here are the guardrails, and here's what they're going to do with it.
it's just not.
I don't think we should go with them with a vote for something less than that or a subset of that, if that makes sense.
All we need is 2 simultaneous votes. One will be talking about how the treasury will be handled, so the plan and all that stuff. And the second vote will be the members of the multisig. Why 2 different votes? Because some darknet operators might agree with the plan, but not agree with the members, for example, or might agree with the members and not agree with the plan. It doesn't make sense, in my opinion, to put it all in one place,
Yeah, you
in
can
one
do
vote.
simultaneous tracks like RV's recommending. There's nothing wrong with 2 simultaneous tracks.
And
We're
Snapshot is
comfortable with one of them being voted. We like one of them, we don't like the other one. You go back to the drawing board on one of them and not the other, and now the process is sort of split. So maybe they approve the voters or who the multi-sig people are, but not the plan. So now
Well,
we have people.
remember, we also, I think, have to ask permission of the broader community to even have this group be put in, right?
That's what
So,
I'm describing. That's what I'm
yeah.
saying
So maybe
is
we
I think
put that on, maybe we tack that piece onto the strategy vote, and we have that one first, and say, okay, well now we have that. Here are the people that we've that have come forward, who are willing to operate that, right? Because now, by ratifying the strategy doc that also says, and we need people, we then have the right to put people forward, right? And then those can be voted on second.
that's what I'm describing, is that we go to the dark node operators with a fully fleshed out plan, and nothing less than that. Although I'm absolutely open to hearing why splitting them up might be more advantageous.
Yeah, well, it would be that they they would be okay with the voting in, like, say, yeah, 7 people, particular people, but they would want to make some recommended change to the strategy, for instance. So it would be partially approved, and if they're combined together, we can't get a partial approval, which might delay things, maybe.
Well, and also, do we have more than 7 volunteers? You know, because if so, the community would have to pick 7 of them.
No, not really, because anyway, by the DAO or crypto project standards, we need to create a topic and we need to create an RFC first. So we create RFC with the initial 7 people, and then the guys who reply, who read it, they might propose themselves. We should give that option, obviously, to them, and then it will transform into our RIP with a bigger list of people if they choose to propose themselves to
Yeah.
volunteer.
So, and this is why they need to be separate votes. You know, because one of them is yes, no. You know, and another one would be a graded choice, right? And they're just
Yes,
not
yes.
compatible to be in the same format of voting.
And Snapshot is actually really cool because it allows multi-option voting.
Yep, so you can vote for everyone if you want everyone to be
Yeah.
part of it, but we would in the end still just pick the 7 top voted community members.
Yeah, I'm actually a fan of Renfield here, with just kind of having it in one vote, and just saying here's the active members and governance. Here's the 7 people. They align with the mission of the DAO, and yeah, just recommend that they make it a yes or no.
Here's the thing, Wes. One of the guys, with all due respect, he was a completely unknown member of the community. At least to me personally, I haven't seen him uh, at all, and he was one of the volunteers. So if we want to go with the 7 people, then I'm not sure that Darknet operators would be okay voting for a completely unknown multisig member.
Well, yeah, there's a vetting process we'll have to go to, like where making a blurb about yourself, saying what you've how long you've been in the Run community, what have you brought to the table. Do you have a dark node? Are you just someone who's whatever, an outside member trying to insert yourself into this DAO? And yeah, I totally agree that there's there's a vetting process that should be done to the volunteers.
To your idea on Renfields, what can be done, I guess, 2 separate RFCs that will be discussed separately, because, as I said, one is members and the second is the plan. It's a completely different thing. And after they have been discussed, they can be combined into one RIP. Maybe, if you want it, if you want to vote, maybe we can do it so. But personally, I don't think that's necessary. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I do like the idea of bringing one vote. I think if we split this up, we have the risk of splitting the vote such that one gets approved, one doesn't. And that just leaves us nowhere. It leaves us somewhere messy of trying to recreate it or use the voted on pieces to fit into the new unvoted on retooled effort. I think back to DeFi Whiskey's original point of getting a quick win, finding a place to put these funds, getting the yield moving, and then also to Michael's point of this is kind of small time. Our main goal here is to start sort of proto DAO governance with a very small amount of funds and
A
get a
very
win
quick
under our
question.
belt.
Very quick question. How is having 2 votes and one not passing, because obviously something was bad, is different than one vote that combines these 2 votes with the same supposedly bad plan that will not pass is different? How is it different? I'm not sure. I'm seeing the difference. If you think that double votes can might not pass at the same time simultaneously, then if one of them doesn't pass, then the combined vote will not pass as well. You get my point?
I think it's going to be harder to take the mandate of half of it and fit it back into the retooled whatever we come up with on the other side. I think fitting the broken pieces together is going to be messier and harder. I think in the service of trying to get our quick win with a small amount of governance of sort of governing ourselves and getting a tiny thing moving. I think ultimately, and again, to the point that was just made earlier, this I think to Liberty's point, this is a transitional thing from team to DAO. We have some level of team support in this. We have a team member here helping to create this proposal. Ultimately, it's going to be brought to the community with some aspect of a nod from the team to say, in collaboration with the community, we've all come up with this plan. We think we need to take it. Here's the reasons why. I don't know. It could get voted down. I think if we split it into multiple votes, I think it gets messier, and I think the finish line gets harder to ultimately cross.
Renfield, I'm starting to come around to this point that you're making. For in the interest of expediency and efficiency, if we can get the proposal is complete and the list is vetted, as would likely be comforting to the community, it could save us a lot of hassle of random people that nobody knows trying to vote themselves in. We don't know, nobody knows, and all kinds of squabbling. And the community could always say no. And then when we ask for feedback, if they say, well, we didn't have enough choice of members, if they care enough, that will be the result. And if not, then we can get to work faster. So, we could always propose the next RFC or RFCs and split things into micro issues if that's a big deal to the community. But maybe it does make sense to bundle it all together for the first attempt, and maybe it gets passed and we can start making progress quicker that way.
I think so as well. It's incumbent upon us to bring them something that serves the community and is compelling and it makes sense. And I mean, look at the members here and everybody chatting. I mean, this is also the community. I mean, this is the community coming up with this plan, and ultimately we want the dark node operators to sign off on it. We are responsible to bring them something that is properly guardrailed, that has the vetting in place that we can describe. We've already talked about the vetting, and it sounds like people here are comfortable with an informal small chat with Max. And between Max and Michael, who we're discussing, it's a small amount of funds, and it might not be necessary to send passports over to Max. So we already kind of talked about that vetting process that we think makes the most sense in this case. That'll go into the ultimate description that we bring to the dark nodes. This is what we've done. This is the due diligence. These are the folks putting it together. Here is what we think we need to do, and here's why. I mean, if they vote it down, they vote it down, and that's the dark node operator's ultimate prerogative on it. But I think if we split it into pieces, I'm really just worried we're not going to get there. We don't get our quick win. We may not find that finish line in any pace here. And I know we're trying to move a little quickly, like Max said, with that function coming shortly for the CEF to support this. I mean, I don't know. That's my case.
So are you just to confirm? So you're suggesting that we as a group will basically select the 7 people that we presented in the final proposal?
That is what I'm suggesting. Although in in respect with the thing we talked about, where maybe Max has a little chat with folks, or doesn't. But I thought we kind of sort of agreed on that, moved past it. But yes, we're going to propose. This is the plan. Here are the folks. Here's why we think these folks are safe. From the concept of, there's enough distribution amongst the signatures. People have to work together. There's a small level of nod that already came from the team, if you will, but we don't want to go too deep down that because we're trying to set up a disconnected DAO, not a team arm. But yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, if there are no big objections, then I can live with that for sure.
We'll still need to propose an RFC, I think, and at that stage, there would be probably community members who would, there could be community members who'd want to be part as well. So we'd want to have a process to handle how we sort of.
There could also be re-election cycles. Maybe that's something we should discuss. That's something we want.
I mean, we should have that later. I mean, it's something we should talk about, but that shouldn't delay setting up the multi-sig. But
okay.
Yeah, I would picture this again. We're trying to get that quick win, a small amount of governance. Ultimately, this yield team will probably exist in a structure under some sort of, I don't know, council. Do you know what I mean? When I think about elections and who can kind of guide the management of the individual working group teams, that makes sense to me rather than some sort of elections. Like if we have a working group whose job is to collate reporting and get that back to another team, like I don't know what level of elections we'll need for each of those, but at some point I think we will need that structure. But do we need that for the yield group?
I mean, that could be handled 300 different ways in the future. There could be like an HR working group that handles that's got a responsibility from the community to handle members in other working groups. I mean, there's different ways we can organize. This will all take time.
I think this topic personally is a Pandora's box, and if we start scratching at it, we're gonna get on a long tangent.
Yeah, so we should try to get an RFC out as soon as possible. Maybe next week, at the end of next week, before Christmas starts. I don't know, it's gonna be a bit messy because people will be AFK. But we can still have an RFC out and let it simmer for a week or so and see what thoughts people have.
Well, let's draft out right now. What are going to be the sections for the RFC? I can volunteer to write it, but I'll need input. From various stakeholders in the process. But why don't we at least get that far so we can have some bullet points to fill in.
And my only 2 cents, sorry to cut you off, Liberty, will be following DeFi's spirit and kind of everybody's spirit. I'm not sure I've heard it, or maybe it hasn't communicated properly. We can present it to the community in a way of saying, hey, this is a one-time vote for a one-time action. There are things coming. I mean, I think that would more or less, obviously, but that, and I obviously I'm working on the whole re-election clauses. Like there's a lot of structure and frameworks that I have to come for this, but the way that this is presented and the way that it has been mentioned by RV, this is a quick win, and I agree with him. Then you just package it as such and tell them, hey, listen, this is a one quick win. This is what we have, and it's almost like a self-destruct. It has a timeline and it has a time frame, and eventually they can re-elect or whatever. So that's just my 2 cents from sort of like a strategy perspective. But I maybe that could be articulated and communicated to the community at large, so there's no misinterpretations or FUD, right? Like, Max selected these people, or I can imagine other community members, right, just saying, and this is why we'll never get to decentralization. It's like, no, not at all. This is why this is happening, and he has a timeline. Just my 2 cents.
Yeah, and I agree. I think we should call it out even in the title of the RFC, something like proposal for an acting Treasury working group and temporary yield farming strategy to grow the treasury or to grow treasury funds. So some title like that. So the temporary nature of what we're doing is there, and then we'll mention in there maybe right up top, right? So section one could be in the interest of progressing towards a more autonomous DAO. We're taking a first step to propose, essentially putting some people in place to manage funds for all of you, and a strategy that we think will grow those funds so that we'll have more to put towards, what we all vote for in the future, right? And then we lay out specifically what we're going to do below that.
Absolutely, I think that's sort of the right tone to take, because sure, I heard the conversation about the voting and everything, but sort of the biggest, if you're a DNO and you're not really that involved, like you're not in this call right now, the biggest fear is, oh my God, these people have been anointed by the team and this is not going where I want to go. Well, we get it. We acknowledge you. We hear you. And that's not at all what we're doing. So just as long as that comes clear. So I agree. The more transparent, the more you grab the bull by its horn in the title and in everything, as far as the time frame of this, absolutely. I think that can only be a win. But I don't know if other community members have other feedback.
Oh, for sure. I mean, that's why we had that sub thread about the guardrails. Like, what is the mandate? What are we trying to ask for here, and what are the limitations of it? This is not some infinite thing, but we did talk about freeing up funds to some group that can vote on it to continue to manage those funds. I do think, Max, to your point about getting an RFC out soon, I think those things, these all have to kind of be answered, don't they? As we sort of make that proposal and then discuss it, we have to kind of know what's the ultimate scope. How long is it going to go? Or do you see us kind of getting that out unfleshed? I mean, I guess that's what we're doing here, right? Is breaking down those ideas.
We could still just say that the one action this group is allowed to make is to deposit REM BTC into BadgerDAO. We could make it such that it's just that. That's the only sort of approved action that can be done, and of course withdrawing funds if there's some kind of hack or whatever. And we could over time sort of start adding new proposals that fleshes this out. It doesn't have. It could be whatever. We can make it more fleshed out, but we don't need it if we're just thinking that we'll do this strategy. We'll put the funds in there for 2 months, and we don't have to move it around.
Yeah, I think that's smart, because we can then look at the scope of this working group as an additive thing that starts from extremely limited, to literally 2 tasks: a deposit and a withdrawal, and then subsequent responsibilities can all be discussed and voted on, while we work on the greater documentation. And if that is what we all think is the best path, then I think this RFC is fairly simple. We have 3 sections. Section 1, sort of preamble, just says, that this is a temporary strategy. It's very limited. We're in the interest of growing the autonomous DAO and the REN community. It's time to take the first step with some strategy and some people. Section 2 will be the strategy, so we can outline essentially, we're going to put this money in BadgerDAO, and we're going to do it, for let's say, I don't know, 1 year unless otherwise voted, or 6 months or quarterly, whatever we want, and deposit additional funds over a set period of time at intervals. We have to talk about that. And then section 3 is the people, right? We'll propose these people, who Max will have spoken with, and given a nod to. And that's all it really has to be. We should definitely have the detail there so people know exactly what they need to. But that gets us a very limited set of responsibilities, so the guardrails are in place. I'm sure we can enforce that programmatically if need be, and then we can continue the work on an operating agreement or constitution, and broader sets of bylaws from there.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, so I've documented a bit of our discussion, rough outline. How about next steps? Any action items that we need to assign here? What are we doing now?
Seeking
Well,
knowledge, posting bylaws, rough draft, and constitution rough draft. Um, you know, by no later than next Friday, not this Friday, next Friday, for community discussion in in what's the name of the working group structure. So you can count me out. You can count me on that one, and then we'll just take the feedback from there and see if we do a Google Doc or whatever. So you can write me down on that.
well, I wonder if we're going to need that level of that level of work put into this singular RFC, or if that's more of a long term strategy.
I
You
think
know,
he's talking about the ongoing
yeah, okay,
conversation.
great, yeah. Well, we should definitely continue that work.
I don't know. I remember RV mentioning in the last phone call he had like a one-page pitch on sort of the sequence, like mapping out the sequence of the actual DeFi move and whatnot. I don't know if we need to like see one page so the community can then reference it and see specifically what is going to happen. I just wanted to see if we, if that's even necessary at this point.
I wanted to ask, am I the only one who thinks that we are just a tad bit overcomplicating things?
Which aspect?
Most of it. The whole point was to create a multisig and then move on. And we want to make the whole deal right now, like the constitution, laws, and all that good stuff, all that awesome stuff. But we want to have it like before next year. It sounds pretty unreal to me because one thing is that we,
Sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
I think there's a long term thread and there's a short term thread, and we've been talking about both. But the Constitution and bylaws, I think that's the long term thread. You know, the
so
RFC.
let's get back to the short term.
Yeah, I think we should focus on. Yeah, from you, what I'm curious, RB, is if you've got the Badger strategy ready to propose, or if you need a little bit more time, and if you want to hop one on a call offline from this, I'm happy to provide feedback or see where you are. I'd like to write a draft of the RFC, so I'll want to be interfacing with anybody who can weigh in on getting something together to propose.
Could you make that a Google Doc or a Notion doc or something that we can edit together?
Absolutely. Yeah. What do we prefer? I mean, I use Notion and Google Docs. I'm better with Google Docs, but happy to use either.
Yeah, I mean, as long as people aren't afraid of Google's privacy things, then we can do Google Docs.
Right.
I don't mind myself. They already know
Yeah,
everything about my
Okay.
life.
yeah, whichever works. Yeah, you could post that in the overall yield strategy, maybe.
Okay.
But yeah,
Do
we're gonna
we
have to have that in
want
place.
do we want to set who is allowed to comment on it? Do we want a pre-approved list to avoid 10,000 people descending on it that that are called anonymous badger in the in the
I don't think
Google?
that's necessary.
Okay.
There's just like 24 people in the working group structure. That's people that have actually clicked on the thread so they can see the messages. So if you post it in there, it's not gonna be
Okay.
seen by thousands of people. It
Okay.
will be seen by
Okay. Great.
24 or something.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll keep a working draft in there. Um, it may be a bit messy at first, but that's what we'll do. So I'll put something together over the next couple of days and then share it, and we can all discuss and add to it until we're ready to propose it. But I do want to press. I think the people part is going to be the easy one here, but the strategy section, I won't know how to write that. Um, because there are people more versed in how Badger DAO functions and what the ideal way to do that is,
Oh,
and there may be some disagreement as to what the strategy needs to be, whether it's all
I just
Bitcoin or
I just remembered why I wanted two separate votes. Because there are two approaches that we can have with regards to regards to the plan, treasury plan. One is to have one option one set strategy, and then they just vote yes or no. The second is to propose different options. So, for example, one is you farm deposit in Badger and just farm with Bitcoin, no boost. Second, you for example buy 50% boost, and the third option is you buy 100% boost. And darknet operators vote on the option they prefer. I think the second approach is more democratic. I think, and it requires a separate vote.
So at the risk of going down a rabbit hole, like, do you want to introduce that for the purpose of democracy? Like, do you want to just have that as an option? I mean, if we run the numbers, the 100% boost returns the higher yield at this point. It would be a more profitable yield at this point, or but do you want to have that as an option so people can choose if they want the one with the higher yield or the lower yield?
Yeah, I think people, at least smart people, they like options. Yeah, they like to decide for themselves. I think.
Would you prefer to give them three options that are, clearly one is more profitable than the other versus suggesting what we think is the most profitable option that the yield team would take? So if they voted on the
I,
least
I
profitable option, the yield team would then.
Is it really as simple as that, though? I mean, there's risk to be considered as well as you dilute
yeah,
Bitcoin with anything
there
else
there
that's not Bitcoin.
exactly. There's more to it than just sheer numbers, because uh, some people might not feel comfortable holding a Badger, for example. I think it's perfectly natural for them, and we shouldn't discount those people. I think we should
Sure,
give
I would
options.
say though it doesn't have to be Badger. It could be Dig, which is a Bitcoin synthetic equal value. We talked about that a little bit prior, and I think we should keep talking about that over in
Yeah,
the yield discussion. But that's continued Bitcoin exposure that still maximizes the boost. Um, like, there are things to consider. We probably don't have all the time left on the call to do that. Let's keep talking
that's a
about this in the
fourth.
yield strategy. But
That's a
my
fourth
point is, it
option.
doesn't have to be all Badger exposure. Um,
Yeah, but still, it's options, right? To vote on. That's the fourth option you just mentioned. Dick instead of Badger.
So I guess I would suggest when I go back to the document that DeFi posted of small working groups that are doing the work of the DAO, and we're looking to empower small working groups with the authority to make those decisions. I think the yield group that we freed up funds and asked the dark node operators to entrust with would be putting that into the yield as they thought made the most sense based on potentially the guidelines that set it up in the first place. I think we were going to propose principles. Our principle was trying to maximize the yield, another thing that was ideally doing it with partners, etc., but that the small working group would be making those decisions rather than, hey, we've got a new idea. There's other strategies out there. Do you guys want to vote on changing the strategy? Here's the various options. I mean, I don't know. Does what I'm saying make sense? I
Yeah, that's
Okay.
a really good point as well. Yeah, it's just a more complex initiative, but yeah, it makes perfect sense. We just need to decide what we want to do initially. For
I just
example, if
pinged
we,
you and
yeah,
Liberty over in the overall yield strategy thread as well. I don't know if anybody else on the call is aware of those sub threads, but one of them is about the yield strategy. I think this conversation definitely needs to keep happening there. What we should do with the funds, should we choose Badger? Should we choose Dig? I think we should hash out the differences, talk about the risks, maybe have some arguments, and figure out what we think we ought to propose. Um,
Yeah,
Thoughts?
I would think that ultimately we should decide what we want to propose as what we think is the best solution for everyone. We
Agreed.
should maybe, if we have disagreements, we could have an internal vote, in one of these calls to see which way we should lean, and then when we propose it, the worst that happens is that it gets smacked down, right? They vote no, and we ask why, and they tell us, and then we fix it. But on the off chance that we could get everything done in one vote, it would save us all a lot of time, and none of us are getting paid for this. So it's I think it's great to err on the side of efficiency for this one thing, so we can get something working, and then we can really hammer out the details and the theory behind what we want the long term to look like.
efficiency, but also B, in service of that future DAO 2.0 structure, that idea of small nimble working groups with limited authority off doing the work that needs to be done.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I just remember, just to, I obviously I'm no DeFi expert by any means, but I remember that what we're discussing now, this was what I recall RV and DeFi had mentioned the last call, that RV cool, he obviously is a lot more knowledgeable on the strategies, the multiple ways to achieve XYZ returns. It obviously that can be drafted or put in writing somehow, and that's what I meant when I said, hey RV, do you have anything like that? Not to complicate things, but just because I do remember there's multiple ways to get there, and we want to minimize the, during the vote, the community sort of saying, hey, but have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? It's like, no, these are the 3-4 options, and blah blah blah. And I'm all for, like Liberty mentioned, if there have to be internal votes, but at the end of the day, the whole point of transitioning to a DAO is so that the DAO can make the best decisions, right? So if there's 7 ways to get the Bitcoin into Badger or whatever, well, maybe let's pick the top 4, and that's obviously a conversation, right? That might have to happen in that thread before.
Yeah, let's continue that in that thread. I'll propose. I'll just propose a way we do it, and we can say no, that's terrible. Let's do it a different way, and we'll get discussing it.
Second.
Yeah.
Max, do you want to have Max? Do you want to have a little video chat here and there with some folks coming up? Is that sounded like just a sort of, this person's not a bot?
Yeah, I have time for this. No problem at all.
Great.
Should we all PM email addresses that could become calendar invites or something like that? Max, how would you like to organize that? And what can we do to make it easier for you?
Sure. An email address and a calendar invite is the easiest, I think. Yeah.
I just want to double check. So how do we want to go with a multi-sig thing? Do we want to make it separate or together with a big plan, treasury plan, badger plan, whatever? Because the multi-sig thing member list itself, we can probably write tomorrow. It's a somewhat simple initiative, and it can be discussed this week. But if we want to go with a big plan, then it takes a lot more time. And
I think we want the temporary acting working group, and we want the simple strategy, right? And all of this can be amended with subsequent votes and proposals. But I think the simplest thing is going to be the easiest to get across the finish line in the near term. Here's the strategy. We're only doing in and out of Badger DAO with this strategy. And here are the people we think are going to do it. And if we need to complicate things, the community will tell us, right? That's my position, anyhow.
Agreed.
Yeah, second that.
Agreed.
So we're going to chat in the yield strategy room what the yield, we need to have the yield strategy we're going to propose. So we're talking about that there. We're going to set up some informal chats with Max on rough, again, informal, not team directed, multi-sig participants. What other aspects need to be put into this small proposal of what we're going to do for the yield working group?
So apart from strategy and people, the only other section 1 here, I'm proposing would be something of a preamble. We the people, blah blah blah. Just a statement of the direction that this is meant to carry us in, right? And we could brainstorm quickly what sorts of things might be included in that. We've I already said, in the interest of growing a more autonomous DAO, could be the first line. Seeking was saying how, I think it was Seeking, small working groups organized around purposes, would be the ultimate goal. And if we have some other thoughts on, how we want to characterize where we're heading in the direction, I can add that in there to sort of say, okay, this is the first step, to getting here. Well, what does here look like?
Completely. You can post what you have if you want. Oh, you have the Google Doc. I forgot. But yeah, so I'll jump in. I'll be more than happy to help you. Yep.
Okay, so I'll probably do the Google Doc in one section, maybe up at the top is kind of the working language, and then below that will be there'll be a divider, and then there'll just be some notes where anybody can can hop in and share thoughts. So this way we have one version that I'm writing with the best information that we've all agreed on, and then we have another spot where people can just put in their thoughts. Does that sound sensible? Or we could do thoughts through comments, but having all that in the margin can be a little confusing.
One thing
Sure.
one tiny little thing that concerns me a little bit is that we are ignoring the forum. I think we should make it a little bit more official and move at least some part of the discussion to the forum, at least when we have a RFC quality post ready.
Could we put a link on the forum to the Discord? Because there's so many moving parts to this conversation. There's different aspects. There's arguments about yield. There's all this different talk. It all seems to be going on for the most part over here. Maybe the forum needs to know that's going on, and we should let them know.
One thing I think so. There's definitely the need to include the broader community, and I think that's wise to do. But I think to invite them to participate, at every stage on every subject, is going to create a lot of signal interference. So what if we proposed any time we have disagreements where the ultimate direction isn't perfectly clear, we can put out little polls for people to click whatever option they support, so we can sort of take the temperature as we go. Rather than saying, okay, this massive discussion's happening in here. Do you want to participate? And then we have suddenly 100 subthreads.
Agreed.
So who wants to play community polling person? Renfield, I'm looking kind of in your direction, since you've been acting kind of like a scribe here, and thanks for the work you've been doing, of course.
I don't quite. Can you elaborate on what you mean a little more so on polling the community?
For instance, after Arby has sort of put together some strategy choices to propose, rather than us just pick one, we could say, okay, if we're going to put the Treasury into Badger, option A looks like this, B, C, D. And rather than having a formal vote, we can take the temperature by just putting a poll out, for people to fill in as they browse through it, something like that.
Exactly what forum is for. RFC, request for comments.
Yeah, alternatively, yeah, I still think we still have that figuring out to do here in the chat, just chatting about it here, which, by the way, is made up of the community. And then additionally, we got to take it to the RFC and say, here's what we're proposing. We think all of this makes sense. Let's talk about it. That's the formal aspect of it. What does everybody think? I still think we can hash most of it out here on Discord, on what we think, us members of the community that are invested in this, right? Like there's plenty of anybody can come in here, and we keep messaging on the other channels like, hey, come talk about this stuff, come help us figure this stuff out. And at some point some will and some won't. I imagine a lot won't, but we'll come up with what we think makes sense, and we'll go to the RFC with it. I don't know. It seems like it's proceeding along in that regard sort of fine, other than if not a little slowly, right?
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, in the interest of serving all of our all of our opinions here, it was a suggestion, but I'm of the mind that at this point we should get to the RFC, get it out there, let the community decide. If they don't like it, they'll slap it down, and we'll try again.
Agreed. And so what that RFC will look like, I have as notes here. It's what we will do, the scope of it, who's gonna do it, and you mentioned the preamble as well, kind of a little bit of explanation about what we're doing here and why.
Yeah, 3 sections. There's the direction that this fits into, roughly, really rough outline. strategy that we're proposing to implement and the people that we want to drive it. So it'll be pretty simple, and we just need to flesh out the detail. Who's got the list, by the way? Is there an actual list yet
A list of what?
of volunteers for the working group?
I think that was in the working group structure chat.
I kept the list. I can share it there.
Could you just PM that over to me so I can put that in my notes?
Yeah, we'll do.
Thank you. Okay, so I think all volunteers should at least write some sort of little bio, which would ultimately be included in the RFC when we're talking about, because people who have a vote won't necessarily have been privy to all of these discussions. A lot of people, who vote for local politicians, they open up their mail and they say, okay, check, 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 and that's it. Some people are more involved, some people are less. So we should get all the detail out there. So I think we should all write some kind of, bio for our, our REN identities with some obvious real world, color, and take a look at all of those before we propose them.
Where do you propose to post this?
In the RFC.
I thought some folks were informally chatting with Max, and then we as a group were just going to have a list of names. You're talking about
I personally don't think that asking people to vote on a list of names with no information behind it is fair. Maybe others disagree.
I kind of disagree because the whole point was, and it was, I think, the Whiskey's opinion as well, is that multisig consists of not necessarily darknet operators, but unknown and committed RAN community members. So basically, if you are not known, it's kind of sketchy.
Everybody can put their introduction in the comments. Those need to be part of the main proposal, maybe.
Yeah, great idea. I think that's a
perfect. We can link. Yeah, we can link each person's intro from their name, so it could just be a link tag in there. So we'll do it like that. Okay. Yeah. So then, I mean, really, the major work that needs to be done yet is to define the strategy options, and then I think this will be pretty quick to put together.
Sounds like a plan.
Sounds exciting, guys. Looking forward to it.
Excellent.
Max,
cool.
Anything else come to mind?
No, I'm very satisfied that we managed to get this far.
Awesome.
Now I do have one concerning thing, guys. That there are 8 people interested in the working group, and there are only 7 spots. Do we need to have a death match?
Who's the 8th person?
There'll be re-elections. There'll be other opportunities to join as well. So don't worry about that. I wouldn't really worry about it too much. I think this is just kind of like following the logic, and I didn't even add myself to it because I saw there were already other folks, and I saw the numbers, and I'm like, okay, no, you know what? There's a lot more to do, right? So.
Oh, you've got to be in there. Are you kidding me? Come on.
Well, there's gonna be a lot.
I'm writing you down.
But I don't know about deathmatch. I mean that's we want to stay away from those words. We're all in here just as in a collaborative effort. But yeah, I mean just the 7.
That was a joke.
I know. Just there's to me, I'm just thrilled, and to hear Max that he likes the rhythm that we're coming together. I mean, I think it's. I'm happy that he feels like that. Hopefully he can communicate that to the core development. We see you guys. We're here to do our part, and we're excited for what's coming. Thank you all for the effort.
Yeah, this was great. I feel like we covered a lot of ground.
Let's go talk about our yield strategy. Liberty, you're going to post a link where we're going to talk about, preamble and the RFC document and putting that together. Let's all go discuss that stuff and work on it.
Cool.
Perfect.
All right. Motion to adjourn.
Both second.
All
All in
right.
favor?
Good stuff.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Thank you,
Bye.
guys.
Thanks, guys.